Alright, we are live, ladies and germs. And yes, this one's coming a bit late too, but I've been procrastinating really badly. But today, we're going to be talking about the 2021 Hungarian Grand Prix. Not really much in the way of news stories this time around, so we can just go ahead and get right into it with the review. So, let's do a quick intro and get right into it. This is the fuel. Alright, what is happening, ladies and germs? This is the Packerman, and welcome to today's edition of The Fuel, where we're going to be talking about the 2021 Hungarian Grand Prix, as I forgot to upload it. God damn it. Technical difficulties! Store. God damn it, cats. Why are you always knocking shit over? See, look at these two right here. Fucking cats. There we go. So, 2021 Hungarian Grand Prix at the Hungaroring. Didn't really see them all that good. Just saw it on the. There's two of them right there. Little shits. But anyways, yeah, we're going to be talking about the Hungarian Grand Prix. This is our 104th edition of The Fuel. The title of today's episode is Sacre Bleu. And we're going to talk about why I called it that here in a little bit. Let's go ahead and get into this review. This really shouldn't take all that long. So 2021 Hungarian Grand Prix. Rain was a factor early on with everyone starting on intermediates. This was a 70 lap race at the Hungaroring. Lewis Hamilton started from the pole. And then we had a melee going into turn one as Valtteri Bottas locked up the tires and rams into the back of Lando Norris, who actually managed to get a better start than he did. Because Bottas started second and Lando, I think, was like fourth or something like that. Got around Bottas, but then when Bottas locked up his front tires, because it was wet, it gets into the back of Lando Norris, who sends him into Verstappen, and then Bottas hits Perez as well. So a bit of a melee. This took 6 cars out of the race. Charles Leclerc was involved in this, as well as Lance Stroll. Perez was knocked out. Bottas was knocked out. Lando Norris was knocked out. So there was quite a few cars that got knocked out of this race. Verstappen took damage to his side pod. And according to Red Bull, they're probably going to take some penalties for having to replace damaged engines. So that could seriously affect them later on down the road. But Verstappen was able to continue, but his car was now seriously hampered by damage. So a lot of people are thinking, "Oh, Mercedes is just doing this shit again." You know, doing some gamemanship on Red Bull. Seriously, people. Like, the person that Bottas ran to the back of was Norris, who's driving a McLaren, not a Red Bull. And do you honestly think that Bottas wants to, do all this shit knowing that his ride is on the line right now? I don't think so. And then there was the thing where Bottas was given a 5-place grid penalty for the next race, which is at the end of this month because they're on their summer break now, which is about a month long. There are a lot of people wondering, Bottas, actually, you know what? I'll save that for later, because there's something that happened after this race was over that we need to talk about as well, and it kind of ties into all this. So I'll hold off on that for a bit. So this results in the first safety car on lap number 1. Leclerc, Stroll, and Bottas were all stopped on the track with race-ending damage, and Perez was also out of the race as well. So red flag for the debris on the track, and then the track actually began to quickly dry as the rain was now gone. And as everybody was coming around to reform, because they were restarting from a dig on the grid, everyone basically came in for dry weather tires except for Lewis Hamilton, who stayed out on the grid on intermediates. Now you might be asking yourself, well, was this a bit of a mistake by Mercedes to leave him out there? He was kind of screwed either way, honestly, because where they were pitted on the pit lane, where they were located on the pit lane, was right at the pit entrance. So even if he were to come in and get the dry weather tires as well, he would have had to wait for the entire field to go by, because you can't release out into the pit lane in Formula One, otherwise it's deemed an unsafe release. So he would have been screwed either way in this case. So he opted to stay out on the intermediates, but the next time around he comes in for the dry tires and is immediately gone to the back of the grid. And Esteban Ocon, who got through all the carnage, assumes the race lead. Yes, Esteban Ocon in the Alpine. Russell drops back to 7th. He actually restarted 2nd, but he was told by the FIA to give those positions back because apparently he was passing cars in the pit lane, so he had to give those positions back. Mazepin out of the race after a collision with Kimi Räikkönen after an unsafe release of Räikkönen, which was under investigation. Giovinazzi given a 10-second stop-and-go penalty for speeding in the pit lane. Ouch. Sebastian Vettel in the Aston Martin tries to close on Ocon for the race lead. Verstappen gets by the Haas of Mick Schumacher for the 10th position. And Räikkönen is given a 10-second time penalty for the unsafe release, which that should have been obvious. Hold on 1 second. I just realized something. That's not what I wanted. There we go. Just realized I forgot to add something again. But that's good now. Hamilton pits on lap 20 for fresh hard tires, with Verstappen and Ricciardo coming in 1 lap later. And Hamilton gets the undercut on the both of them, which is pretty big. Hamilton starts cutting his way through the field on the fresh hards, moving up to 7th on lap 28. George Russell gets by Mick Schumacher for 9th. So both of the Williams were actually in the points at this point. Him and Nicholas Latifi. Vettel pits on lap 37 from the 2nd position. Ocon pits from the lead on lap 38 and manages to stay ahead of Vettel, preventing the undercut, which is huge. Alonso assumed the race lead, but then pits from the lead on lap 40. Vettel keeps things close with Ocon, though. I mean, they were never really apart during this race. I mean, I don't think the lead was any more than 2 seconds during this entire race between Ocon and Vettel. Hamilton comes in for his 2nd stop for fresh mediums. And could have damn... I mean, if things would have worked out a little bit better as far as what I'm about to talk about, he could have gotten up there and stolen this race and gotten that 100th win. Vettel makes a move on Ocon for the race lead in turn 1 as Ocon tries to pass the back marker of Räikkönen, but Ocon is able to hold him off. Battle for 3rd starts heating up between Carlos Sainz, Fernando Alonso, and Lewis Hamilton. And it was at this point that Alonso played a great defensive game against Hamilton. I mean, he held him off for so many laps. Verstappen gets by Daniel Ricciardo for 10th and the final point. And it was at this point that Bottas would be assessed a 5-spot grid penalty for the next race at Spa for the incident on lap 1, which we'll be getting to in a minute. Hamilton finally gets by Alonso in turn 1 with 6 laps to go. After Alonso locked up the tires in turn 1, and that gave Hamilton the move. Hamilton gets by Sainz for 3rd with 4 laps to go in turn 1, although Sainz fought really hard to get back by Hamilton, but it was not going to happen. But he moves back onto the podium. Hamilton actually managed to get within a second of Sebastian Vettel who himself was only like a second or two behind Esteban Ocon, who is the shock winner of the Hungarian Grand Prix, giving him his maiden Formula One victory, which is always an exciting thing. It's always great to see a new winner in Formula One, and even Lewis Hamilton himself had his praises, saying, yeah, I mean, he's kind of been a hidden star in Formula One, so pretty high praise from the 7-time champion. So Esteban Ocon, the shock winner of the Hungarian Grand Prix. Big win for him and Alpine, and if it wasn't for his teammate Alonso's great defense against Lewis Hamilton, Ocon would not have won this race because Hamilton was coming on the fresh mediums. But Alonso's defense won his teammate Ocon the race. So, I'm pretty sure he's going to be thanking Alonso for all that. And I think he did so after the race, though, too, before they got on the podium. So, Vettel finished second. Hamilton recovers to finish in third. Both Williams drivers finished 8th and 9th, which is a double points day for the Williams team. So, big day for them. Crazy ass race. Crazy race. Overall lead changes. There were actually 5 lead changes in this race, which is the second most this season. None of them were pure, none of them were on the racetrack, but I mean, it doesn't really matter because the racing was still pretty good. And 1 safety car. That's pretty much it. The other crazy thing about Ocon's victory with Alpine, it is the first time that a French driver driving a French manufacturer, because their constructor is Renault. This was the former team known as Renault. So this is actually Alonso's second stint with said team. It's just under a new name, because this is the same team that Alonso won both of his world championships in 05 and 06. But this is the first time that a French driver driving a French car has won a Formula One Grand Prix since 1983. Guy by the name of Alain Prost. Might have heard of him. At one time was the winningest driver in Formula One history, and was, I think, a 3-time Formula One world champion. Or was it 4? Was it 3 or 4? He's a 4-time champion. Okay. And he was the winningest driver of all time until 2001 when Michael Schumacher overtook him. But yeah, the first time since 1983 that a French driver driving a French car won a Formula One Grand Prix. Nearly 4 decades ago. Unreal. Alright, so let's get into the race results, and this is where we're going to start getting into the other shit. So, race results. So, Esteban Ocon take the top spot of the podium with Sebastian Vettel second and Lewis Hamilton third. And then he had Carlos Sainz in fourth, Fernando Alonso in fifth. Both of the AlphaTauris of Gasly and Tsunoda in fifth and sixth and seventh, rather. Both of the Williams in 8th and 9th. Latifi and Russell gaining points for Williams. And Max Verstappen gets the final point in 10th position. At least that's what it was initially. And then news broke after the race that Sebastian Vettel was disqualified from that second position because the officials could not draw the required fuel out of the car. They could only draw about 300 milliliters of fuel out of the car, and regulations state that you have to have at least 1 liter of fuel. Now, some of you are asking, well, why is this? Well, it's going to tie back into everything that I just said. So, and remember that Valtteri Bottas got a 5-place grid penalty for, basically wrecking 6 cars, even if it was unintentional, as the cat is investigating the camera. But so it's like, yeah, he wrecked 6 cars with that. But he's only getting a 5-place grid penalty, and yet Sebastian Vettel is getting disqualified. That doesn't seem right to me. What a lot of people don't realize about that is that Formula One has two sets of regulations. There are the sporting regulations, which governs all the stuff that happens on the racetrack, and then there are the technical regulations, which governs everything on the car itself. Basically, you know, it has to be certain weight, certain height, you know, there can only be certain parts approved on the car, you know, that sort of thing. And let's be completely honest here, people. How many times has Valtteri Bottas basically wrecked the entire field in Formula One, particularly in this year? I think this is his first DNF. No, actually, this is his first DNF due to a crash. He actually DNF'd Monaco, but that was due to mechanical failure more than anything else. But, I mean, he hasn't really done much of anything wrong this year. I mean, he's been finishing on the podium. I mean, he hasn't been as competitive as in the past couple of years, but I mean, he's still getting podium results. And in this case, it was a mistake. It was a bad mistake. I mean, it took out 6 cars, including himself. But I mean, this is a first-time offense for him. So, I mean, it's not like he's been doing this every single fucking week. So let's take a chill on that. And then you look at what happened with Vettel and why he was disqualified. It's part of the technical regulations. And this rule has been in place apparently for over 30 years now. And the reason why Formula One, the FIA needs a liter of fuel to be drawn from the car is because that's the amount that they need to be able to test, excuse me, to be able to test the fuel. And you might be asking yourself, well, why do they test the fuel? Well, to make sure that it hasn't been tampered with, because there's all sorts of shit that you can put into your fuel to make the engine, to help the engine run better, to fire off better, which in turn means more speed, aka a competitive advantage. And tampering with fuel is a big no-no in motorsports that can result in humongous fines. So that's one of the reasons why they need that amount of fuel, so that they'll have an adequate amount to be able to test with, to make sure that it hasn't been tampered with. And so Vettel was disqualified from the race for that. So as a result, I'm going to go ahead and load up the new race results. Boom! There's your new top 10 after Vettel's disqualification. And by the way, Aston Martin has appealed the disqualification. As of right now, I don't really know if they've been rejected or if they're going to take a look at it, but, you know, they're still going to... Cat, quit trying to claw me, damn it. I mean, it's already bad enough that I got all these fucking scratches on me as it is. God damn, man. Cats are great, but, man, they can be a pain in the ass. But Aston Martin is appealing the penalty. Whether or not they're going to be successful, I mean, that's another story. But there's your new top 10. Ocon, of course, still the winner. Lewis Hamilton moves up to second, and that's actually pretty significant in the championship standings, as they've completely swung in the other direction now. Carlos Sainz now moves up to the podium, his second podium with Ferrari. Fernando Alonso jumps up to 4th, so that's Alpine in P1 and P4, so big deal for them. Gasly and Tsunoda move up to 5th and 6th for AlphaTauri. Then you have Nicholas Latifi and George Russell. Of course, they were getting double points days, but then they get a little bit more, moving up to 7th and 8th. Verstappen gains one more spot up to 9th. And Kimi Räikkönen, despite his pit penalty, comes home in the 10th position and will get 1 point for Alfa Romeo. What are you doing, cat? Huh? What are you doing? Huh? Oh shit. So that's what the top 10 looks like. Now here are the driver standings, well initially, before the DQ. Driver standings. Lewis Hamilton is the points leader once again, that's right. He was 33 points behind before the British Grand Prix. And now that he is And now that we're heading into the summer break for Formula One, he is 6 ahead. Well, at least before the disqualification. Verstappen drops to second. Lando Norris, despite DNFing this race, remains on third. Actually, pretty much third through eighth remained unchanged, at least initially. Bottas, then you have Perez, both of the Ferrari drivers of Leclerc and Sainz. Ricciardo, Sebastian Vettel would have been ninth in the standings with his second place finish, and Pierre Gasly was in the top 10, actually dropped down to 10th. But now let's take a look at what the point standings look like with the disqualification. Boom. Big change. Notice that Hamilton has a slightly bigger lead. He now has an 8-point advantage as opposed to a 6-point advantage. And you might be asking yourself, why is that? It's based on the number of points that are earned for each position. Verstappen moved from 10th to 9th, so he went from gaining 1 point to 2 points, but that's only a 1-point increase. Whereas Hamilton moved from 3rd to 2nd. 3rd pays out 15 points, but 2nd pays out 18 points. That's a 3-point increase. So Hamilton gained 3 points with the disqualification, whereas Verstappen only gained 1. That's a 2-point swing in Hamilton's direction. Which means that in the last 2 races, Hamilton has gone from 33 points behind to 8 ahead. This championship has swung 41 points in the other direction. That is a shit ton of points in Formula One. But Norris remains in 3rd, Bottas in 4th, Sergio Perez in 5th. A little bit of a change though, as Carlos Sainz, he gains some more points and moves ahead of his teammate Leclerc up into 6th in the championship. Pierre Gasly now moves up and is 8th in the overall championship, with Ricciardo dropping down to 9th. And then Esteban Ocon, with his victory, now moves all the way up to 10th in the point standings. That just goes to show you how much of a shock Ocon's win was, because, I mean, pretty much hasn't been scoring all that many points. I mean, before this Hungarian Grand Prix, he had 14 points through 10 races. Now he's at 39 and in the top 10 in the driver standings. So I would say, as far as he's concerned, he's had a successful season. And this obviously has had a big impact on the constructors' standings as well. Because you look at the constructor standings, because Red Bull had a pretty big lead over Mercedes in the constructor standings. Not anymore. Not anymore. Because Mercedes has now moved ahead of Red Bull in the constructor standings with 300 points. Again, this is before the disqualification. So I'll show that here in a second. Red Bull with 290. McLaren at 163. Ferrari with 160. And then you have Alpine making a big jump all the way up to 5th. Then you have Aston Martin, AlphaTauri, Williams with their first points of the year, Alfa Romeo, and Haas with 0 points. But after the disqualification, here's the new constructor standings. Boom! Mercedes with 303, Red Bull with 291. So Mercedes pulls ahead now, and they're 12 points ahead of Red Bull in the constructor standings. Ferrari and McLaren, 2 old rivals, are now level in the constructor standings at 163. Of course, Alpine's move is now up to 77 points. They're 5th in the constructors. AlphaTauri drops down to 6th. Aston Martin drops to 7th. Williams now all the way up to 8th in the constructor standings. And that's a pretty big deal because from what I've heard, the payouts between the teams in the constructor standings, the gaps between the payouts are pretty damn significant. So Williams moving up 2 spots in the constructor standings is a big deal for them, because they could potentially get 8th in the constructor standings, and while that's not exactly great for them, it's a big deal because that means more from that constructor's cash pool. But that's pretty much going to do it for today's edition of the Hungarian Grand Prix of the fuel, reviewing the Hungarian Grand Prix. And now you know why I called it Sacre Bleu, because we had a French driver getting his first career win. And this review lasted almost half an hour. Kind of surprised considering how very little news there was. Although there was a lot of shit that happened in the race. Oh, I almost forgot. I almost forgot to give my final rating. That's one thing I forgot to do. My final rating for this race, I thought it was pretty damn good. Good racing, crazy shit. I'll give it a 7 on the fuel gauge. Cat, get off my damn phone. God damn. What's wrong with you? Huh? God, I love you cats, but god damn, you gotta learn to not mess with shit. Anyways, yeah, 7 out of 10 on the fuel gauge. I thought it was a pretty good race. But that's going to do it for this edition of The Fuel. Thank you very much for watching. And until next time, this is the Packerman signing out. See you later.
Thank you for watching tonight's video. Be sure to like and subscribe, you rats!